Okay, so this is problem number 14 on the bonus practice problems for exam number 2. And what this problem is asking is about solubilities and insolubilities of given compounds. And in this example, we've got 5 compounds that we're looking at, and we're going to determine whether these are soluble or insoluble based on the exceptions in the solubility chart with those elements. So our very first example we have is going to be silver iodide. So that's Ag and then I. Now, to determine, the first thing we want to look at is we can look at these two elements individually. Let's look at the iodine first. Iodine is a halogen. And the halogens are actually soluble. So halogens are soluble. But there is one exception to the rule with halogens. If a halogen is combined in a compound with either mercury, lead, or silver, it automatically makes them insoluble. Therefore, we can conclude that because we have a silver ion or a silver atom included in this compound, we can agree that this is an insoluble compound. Now remember, like I said, normally halogens are soluble, but because there's a silver atom included into this compound, it automatically makes it insoluble. Okay, so the next example we want to look at is, oh, hang on one second. The next example we want to look at is sodium carbonate. So we have a, that's going to be Na2CO3. And we want to look at these cases again. Now, sodium, if we break this apart, we're going to have sodium, and then of course we're going to have carbonate. So now sodium here is a group 1 metal. And if you look at a solubility chart, group 1 metals are always soluble. There is no exception to the rule. There's no compound or there's no elements that when they're combined with the group 1 metals that causes them to be insoluble. Now, that being said, let's see, carbonate is technically an insoluble compound. But if we look at the solubility chart, carbonate is going to become soluble with the combination of sodium. And therefore, we can say that sodium carbonate is indeed soluble. Okay, moving on to the next one, we have barium chloride. Now, barium chloride is, we're dealing with barium as a metal, and then we've got our chloride here. And when we look at this here, we've got chlorine, which is a halogen. And like we stated earlier, halogens are always going to be soluble with the exception of mercury, lead, or silver. And because we're not dealing with silver, lead, or mercury here, we can agree that this is a soluble compound. There is because barium is not going to affect the solubility of this compound. So we can agree that this is soluble. All right, the next one we have is aluminum hydroxide. Now, aluminum hydroxide here, there is a couple things to keep in mind about hydroxide here. So hydroxide is always insoluble with the exception of a couple cases. Group 1 metals, if a group 1 metal is combined with a hydroxide, it makes it soluble. Group 1 metals are going to include your lithiums, potassiums, sodiums, calciums. Also, ammonia is another case which would cause, or I'm sorry, not ammonia, ammonium, I want to say it is, that creates creates the hydroxide to become soluble. And then those are the only cases we have. Now, looking at this, aluminum is not a group 1 metal. And because it is not a group 1 metal, and it's also not one of the other, another one of the examples, Therefore, we can conclude that this is actually an insoluble compound because, again, hydroxide is always insoluble with the exception of those group 1 metals and a couple other metals. Okay, so that one would be insoluble. And lastly, we have zinc acetate. Now, zinc 2 acetate, if we look at the solubility chart, we can see that acetate is actually a soluble compound or soluble atom. And again, just like the group 1 metals, it is also, there's no exceptions that cause it to become insoluble. No matter what you combine with acetate, it's going to stay soluble. So whether that be zinc, whether that be silver, it doesn't matter. It's going to be soluble. So we can agree that zinc 2 acetate will always be soluble. Okay, so this is just kind of a little run through of some examples of solubility. Yeah, that's pretty much it.